The conference room fell silent as Danielle Givens signed her name on the contract termination papers. $500 million gone with the stroke of a pen. The Whitmore family sat frozen across the mahogany table, their privileged smiles finally wiped clean. What started as the biggest deal of the century had just become the most expensive lesson in respect money couldn't buy. How did a routine business meeting between a black tech CEO and America's most powerful family turn into a corporate earthquake that would shake Wall Street to its core? This is the story of what happens when old money meets new principles and discovers that some things are worth more than profit margins. Danielle Givens stared at the embossed invitation in her hands, the Whitmore Industries logo gleaming in gold. 20 years of building her cybersecurity empire from a cramped apartment to a billion-dollar company. And now the most powerful family in corporate America wanted to merge. "This is it," she whispered to her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan office. At 42, she'd broken every glass ceiling in tech. But the Whitmores represented something bigger, generational wealth that dated back to railroad barons and oil tycoons. The merger would create the largest cybersecurity conglomerate in history. Her innovative AI-driven security systems, combined with their vast network of government contracts, could reshape national defense. The preliminary numbers were staggering. A $500 million initial investment, with projected revenues exceeding $2 billion annually. Her assistant knocked gently. "Ms. Givens, your car is here. The Whitmore estate is expecting you in an hour." Danielle smoothed her navy blazer, the same one she'd worn to her first Fortune 500 board meeting. She'd learned early that in rooms full of old money, every detail mattered. Her natural hair was pulled back in a sophisticated bun, her makeup flawless, but understated. She looked the part of a CEO, but she knew that wouldn't be enough. The drive to the Whitmore estate took her through Connecticut's most exclusive neighborhoods, past gates that had protected family fortunes for generations. As her car pulled through the wrought iron entrance, Danielle felt the weight of history. The mansion ahead looked like something from a period drama, all stone columns and manicured gardens. Richard Whitmore III greeted her at the door, his silver hair perfectly styled, his handshake firm but brief. "Ms. Givens, welcome to our home. We're so pleased you could join us." The warmth in his voice felt rehearsed, like a performance for an audience she couldn't see. As he led her through marble hallways lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, Danielle noticed the subtle signs. The way the household staff avoided eye contact. The careful distance maintained by family members who nodded politely but never quite smiled. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at the same time, we'll bring you another story of black people leading the way that you won't want to miss. The business dinner was set in a private dining room, where crystal glasses caught the light from an antique chandelier. As Danielle took her seat, she noticed she was the only person of color at the table. A detail that seemed to hang in the air like an unspoken acknowledgement. But what happened next would change everything she thought she knew about power, respect, and the price of doing business with America's elite. The dinner conversation flowed smoothly around topics of market expansion and regulatory advantages. But Danielle sensed undercurrents she couldn't quite identify. Richard's wife, Catherine, spoke in measured tones about their charitable work in urban communities, while their son, Brad, dominated the discussion with aggressive projections that seemed designed to intimidate rather than inform. "Your company's growth has been remarkable," Catherine said, her fork pausing mid-air. "Especially considering your background." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Danielle had heard this before. The subtle questioning of her credentials, the implication that her success was somehow surprising given her race. She maintained her composure, responding with facts about her MIT education and her company's industry awards. "Of course, we understand the importance of diversity in today's market," Brad added, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Having you as the face of our cybersecurity division could be quite valuable." Danielle's grip tightened on her wine glass. She was being positioned as a token, a diversity hire for a company she'd built with her own vision and sacrifice. The merger was beginning to feel less like a partnership and more like an acquisition of her credibility. As the evening progressed, the family's true attitude surfaced in coded language and calculated slights. When discussing the merger's leadership structure, Richard casually mentioned that Brad would oversee integration and cultural alignment, corporate speak for managing her transition into their world. "We believe in maintaining our company culture," he explained. "It's what's made us successful for 5 generations." The message was clear. She would be absorbed into their legacy, not added to it. Her innovations would bear their name. Her achievements would become their history. The woman who had revolutionized cybersecurity would become a footnote in their family's corporate empire. But it was the conversation after dinner that revealed the depth of their disrespect. As they moved to the library for brandy, Danielle excused herself to take a call from her Tokyo office. Walking past the study, she heard voices through the partially open door. "She's exactly what we need," Catherine was saying. "Smart enough to be useful, but she'll know her place. The board will love having her for photo ops," Brad replied with a laugh. "Nothing says progressive like a black woman CEO in our annual report." Danielle's blood ran cold. She pressed herself against the wall, listening as they discussed her like a prop in their corporate theater. These weren't partners, they were colonizers, planning to strip mine her company for their benefit while using her image to modernize their reputation. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't about her technology or her vision. It was about optics, about checking boxes, about maintaining power while appearing progressive. They saw her as a sophisticated form of corporate decoration. As she rejoined the group, her mind was already calculating. The contracts weren't signed yet. She still had options. But first, she needed to understand exactly what she was dealing with and what it would cost her to walk away from $500 million. The question was, how much was her dignity worth? The following morning's contract review meeting revealed the true architecture of the Whitmore's plan. Danielle sat in their corporate boardroom surrounded by lawyers and executives as the terms of the merger were laid out in excruciating detail. "As you can see," Richard's attorney explained, "the integration plan calls for a complete restructuring of leadership roles." Danielle studied the organizational chart projected on the wall. Her title would change from CEO to Chief Innovation Officer, a demotion disguised as lateral movement. Her entire executive team would be evaluated for cultural fit, corporate language for systematic replacement. "What about decision-making authority?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. Brad leaned forward with a condescending smile. "You'll have complete autonomy over innovation initiatives, within approved parameters." The phrase, "approved parameters," was the key. Every decision, every strategic move, every innovation would require their approval. She would become a well-paid employee in the company she'd built from nothing. During the lunch break, Danielle stepped onto the building's executive terrace for air. The view of Manhattan stretched before her, a city where she'd fought for every opportunity, where she'd proven herself 1,000 times over. Now she was being asked to surrender it all, for the promise of integration into a world that would never truly accept her. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter. "Mom, saw the news about the merger online. So proud of you, can't wait to celebrate." The innocence in those words cut deep. Her 20-year-old daughter at Harvard Business School saw this as the ultimate validation of her mother's success. How could she explain that the biggest deal of her career was also the biggest insult? When the meeting resumed, the Whitmore's true colors emerged during a discussion about public relations strategy. Catherine pulled out a folder of mock-up advertisements featuring Danielle prominently in Whitmore Industries campaigns. "We're thinking innovation meets tradition as our tagline," she said, spreading glossy proofs across the table. "You'll be the face of our modernization efforts." In every image, Danielle was positioned slightly behind the Whitmore men, her achievements listed as contributions to the Whitmore legacy. They weren't just buying her company, they were buying her image, her credibility, her very identity to launder their reputation. The final straw came during a casual conversation about the merger announcement. Richard mentioned their plan to host the signing ceremony at their private country club, a venue that until 1995 had excluded black members entirely. "It's quite historical," he said with obvious pride. 5 generations of Whitmores have made their biggest deals there. Your signing would be symbolic." The symbolism was crystal clear. She would be the first black person to sign a major contract at a club that had spent decades keeping people like her out. They wanted her to legitimize their history of exclusion by becoming their token of inclusion. Danielle excused herself to the restroom. her hands shaking as she gripped the marble sink. In the mirror, she saw her father's eyes, the man who'd worked 3 jobs to put her through school, who'd taught her that no amount of money was worth selling your soul. When she returned to the boardroom, the contracts were waiting for her signature. $500 million, security for her employees, a place at the table of American corporate royalty. But at what cost? As she picked up the golden pen, Danielle realized she was at a crossroads that would define not just her career but her legacy. The room fell silent, waiting for her to make history. Instead, she was about to make a choice that would shake the very foundations of American business. The country club was everything Danielle had expected. Old money elegance with an undercurrent of exclusivity that made her skin crawl. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over rooms where America's elite had made deals that shaped the nation's economy. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was about to make the most important decision of her career in a place that would have barred her entrance just 30 years ago. As guests mingled in the oak-paneled signing room, Danielle noticed the careful choreography of the event. Photographers positioned themselves to capture the historic moment. Business journalists from major publications prepared to document the merger that would create a cybersecurity empire. But it was the guest list that revealed the Whitmore's true intentions. Every major figure in their social circle was present. Senators, federal judges, Fortune 500 CEOs. This wasn't just a business signing. It was a debutante ball for their new diversity initiative. Quite a turnout, Richard said, appearing at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. Everyone's excited to witness history. History. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. Whose history would this be? The story of a brilliant Black entrepreneur who built a billion-dollar empire? Or the tale of how old money absorbed new innovation while barely changing its spots? As the ceremony began, Danielle found herself seated at the head table, flanked by the Whitmore family. The seating arrangement was deliberate. She was displayed like a trophy, proof of their progressive values. Camera flashes captured every moment as Richard stood to address the crowd. Today marks a new chapter for Whitmore Industries, he began, his voice carrying the confidence of inherited power. By welcoming Danielle Givens into our family, we're not just expanding our business, we're evolving our legacy. The applause was polite but measured. These were people who understood the careful balance of maintaining tradition while appearing modern. Danielle was their solution to that balance. A brilliant Black woman who would modernize their image without threatening their power structure. When it was her turn to speak, Danielle rose slowly. The room fell silent, waiting for her to play her assigned role in their narrative. She looked out at the sea of faces, powerful, wealthy, and almost uniformly white. These were the people who controlled American business, who decided which innovations succeeded and which entrepreneurs received funding. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice steady. This is indeed a historic moment. She paused, her eyes finding the cameras that would carry her words across business networks and social media. Her daughter would be watching. Her employees would be waiting. The entire tech industry would be analyzing every word. For 20 years, I've built my company on a simple principle. Innovation thrives when diverse voices are heard, not just tolerated. Her voice grew stronger. True partnership requires mutual respect, not just mutual benefit. The room's energy shifted subtly. This wasn't the grateful acceptance speech they'd expected. Richard's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as Danielle continued. I've spent my career proving that excellence has no color. That innovation comes from authentic voices, not manufactured diversity. She picked up the golden pen, its weight suddenly enormous in her hand. The photographers leaned forward, ready to capture the moment that would cement her place in the Whitmore empire. The contracts lay open before her, each page representing millions of dollars and countless opportunities. But as Danielle stared at the signature line, she saw something else entirely. The faces of every young Black entrepreneur who would see this moment and wonder if success meant surrendering authenticity for acceptance. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Richard cleared his throat softly, a subtle prompt for her to complete the ceremony. The room held its breath. Instead of signing, Danielle set the pen down with deliberate precision. I'm afraid I can't do this, she said, her words carrying clearly across the silent room. The shock was immediate and palpable. This wasn't in the script. The country club's signing room erupted in confused murmurs as Danielle stood, her decision reverberating through the crowd like an earthquake. Richard's face had gone pale, while Catherine's perfectly composed expression cracked, just enough to reveal the rage beneath. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Richard's voice was carefully controlled, but his knuckles were white as he gripped the table edge. "I said I can't do this," Danielle repeated, her voice gaining strength with each word. "This merger isn't a partnership, it's a performance. You don't want my innovation, you want my image." The room's elite sat frozen, unsure how to process this unprecedented breach of protocol. In their world, deals of this magnitude didn't fall apart during signing ceremonies. Public humiliation was a currency they rarely experienced. Brad shot to his feet, his corporate diplomacy finally abandoning him. "Do you have any idea what you're walking away from? $500 million. The chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. Bigger than myself?" Danielle's laugh was sharp and clear. "I built $1 billion company from nothing. I don't need to be part of your legacy. I'm building my own." The photographers, initially stunned into silence, began capturing what was clearly becoming the business story of the decade. The headline was writing itself. "Black Tech CEO walks away from 500." Catherine stood slowly, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that only comes from generations of unquestioned privilege. "You're making a mistake, dear. In business, emotion is a luxury you can't afford." "You're right," Danielle replied, gathering her briefcase with steady hands. "Emotion is a luxury, but dignity isn't. Self-respect isn't. And authenticity certainly isn't." She turned to address the room, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had built empires while others inherited them. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand something. I didn't work 20 years to build a company just to hand it over to people who see me as a diversity hire with good technology." The silence was deafening. These were people accustomed to power, to having their offers accepted, their terms agreed to. Rejection, especially public rejection, was foreign territory. "You saw an opportunity to modernize your image while maintaining your power structure," Danielle continued. "You wanted to use my face to sell your evolution while keeping me in a subordinate role. That's not partnership, that's exploitation with better marketing." Richard's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. "You're being unreasonable. We offered you more money than most people see in a lifetime. We welcomed you into our family." "Your family?" Danielle's eyebrows rose. "The same family that spent the cocktail hour discussing how I'd know my place? The family that planned to use me for photo ops while your son managed my cultural alignment?" The admission hit the room like a thunderbolt. These powerful people, masters of corporate discretion, had been caught in their own arrogance. Their private conversations, their real motivations, were now public knowledge. "I heard every word," Danielle said, her voice cutting through their shocked silence. "Did you really think I was so desperate for your approval that I'd ignore your disrespect?" She moved toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor with decisive authority. At the doorway, she turned back one final time. "To everyone in this room, remember this moment. Remember the day a black woman walked away from $500 million because some things are worth more than money. My dignity isn't for sale, my vision isn't for lease, and my legacy won't be written by people who see me as a means to their end." The doors closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like thunder. Outside, her driver was waiting, and as they pulled away from the country club, Danielle felt something she hadn't experienced in years: the pure, uncompromised power of staying true to herself. But the real consequences of her decision were just beginning to unfold. Within hours, the story exploded across every major business network. Tech CEO destroys $500 million deal in stunning public rejection dominated headlines, while social media erupted with reactions that split cleanly along predictable lines. Danielle sat in her Manhattan office, watching the coverage unfold on multiple screens. Her communications team had been fielding calls from reporters, investors, and industry leaders all afternoon. The business world was trying to understand what had just happened and what it meant for everyone else. Her phone buzzed constantly. Text messages poured in from fellow Black executives, entrepreneurs, and business leaders. "Proud of you. You did what we've all wanted to do." History will remember this moment. But the calls from her board members were less celebratory. Emergency meetings were being scheduled. Investors were demanding explanations. Her stock price had dropped 12% in after-hours trading. As Wall Street grappled with the reality that she'd just walked away from the biggest deal in her company's history. "Miss Givens," her assistant knocked gently. "Your daughter is on line 3. Mom?" The voice was uncertain. Younger than her 20 years. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" Danielle closed her eyes, feeling the weight of generational responsibility. "I'm fine, baby. Better than fine, actually. But the money, the opportunity." "What opportunity?" Danielle asked gently. "The opportunity to compromise everything I've taught you about self-worth. The opportunity to show you that success means accepting disrespect as long as the check is big enough." The silence stretched across the phone line before her daughter's voice returned. Stronger now. "You're right. I know how hard you've worked for recognition like this." "Recognition?" Danielle laughed softly. "Sweetheart, they weren't recognizing me. They were using me. There's a difference, and it's a difference I need you to understand before you enter this world." As evening fell over Manhattan, Danielle's senior staff gathered in the conference room. These were the people who'd believed in her vision, who'd left comfortable jobs at major corporations to help build something revolutionary. Now they faced an uncertain future because their CEO had chosen principles over profit. "I won't lie to you," she told them. "Walking away from this deal will hurt us in the short term. Some investors will lose confidence. Some opportunities will disappear. But we'll survive because we always have." Her CFO, Marcus, raised the obvious question. "What's our next move? How do we replace that kind of capital?" "We don't replace it," Danielle said firmly. "We redefine it. We find partners who value our innovation, not our optics. We build relationships based on mutual respect, not convenient diversity." The room buzzed with nervous energy. These were brilliant people who understood both the business implications and the moral significance of what had happened. They were proud of their CEO's stand, but they were also worried about their futures. "I want you all to know," Danielle continued, "that anyone who wants to leave has my full support and recommendation. What I did today was my choice, and I won't let it hurt your careers." To her surprise, no one moved. Her head of cybersecurity, Dr. Sarah Chen, spoke for the room. "We didn't come here to work for just any company. We came here to work for you, for this vision. If you think we're going to abandon ship now, you don't know us very well." As the meeting broke up, Danielle felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the pure satisfaction of being surrounded by people who valued character as much as compensation. But across town, in the marble halls of Whitmore Industries, a very different conversation was taking place. The family that had never been publicly humiliated was planning their response to the woman who had dared to embarrass them in front of their peers. The real battle was just beginning. 3 months later, Danielle stood before a packed auditorium at the National Association of Black Business Owners annual conference. The story of her rejection of the Whitmore deal had become a case study in business schools, a rallying cry for entrepreneurs of color, and a watershed moment in discussions about authentic diversity versus performative inclusion. "The question I'm asked most often," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room, "is whether I regret walking away from $500 million. The audience leaned forward. This was the question everyone wanted answered, whether principle could truly triumph over profit in American capitalism. "Let me tell you what happened after I left that country club," she continued. "Within a week, I received calls from 12 different investment firms run by people who understood that my technology was valuable precisely because it came from my authentic vision, not despite it." The room stirred with interest. The business press had been speculating about her company's future, but she'd remained largely silent about her next moves. 6 months from now, we'll announce a partnership with a consortium of minority-owned investment firms and international tech companies that values our innovation at $2.7 billion, more than 5 times what the Whitmores offered. The applause was thunderous, but Danielle raised her hand for silence. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because walking away from that deal did something more valuable than securing better terms. It sent a message to every young entrepreneur in this room. Every person who's been told they should be grateful for opportunities that diminish them. She paused, looking out at faces that reflected her own journey. The struggles, the doubts, the moments of choosing between acceptance and authenticity. The Whitmore family represents old systems of power that want to appear progressive without actually changing. They offered me a seat at their table, but they wanted to choose my meal, dictate my conversation, and control my voice. That's not a seat at the table, that's a performance on their stage. In the weeks following her speech, something remarkable happened. Other executives began speaking publicly about their own experiences with performative diversity. A prominent Latina CEO walked away from a board position after being introduced as their diversity hire. A Black venture capitalist publicly called out firms that courted minority partners for optics while excluding them from real decision-making. The movement became known as the Authenticity Rebellion, a rejection of tokenism disguised as opportunity. Business schools added new courses on ethical leadership and authentic diversity. Corporate America was forced to confront the difference between inclusion and integration. But perhaps the most significant change happened in Danielle's own office. Her daughter, now in her senior year at Harvard Business School, joined the company as a summer intern not because of family connections, but because she'd earned it through her own merit and vision. I used to think success meant being accepted by people who'd never fully accept me, her daughter said during a quiet moment in Danielle's office. Now I understand that real success means building something so valuable that acceptance becomes irrelevant. As the sun set over Manhattan, Danielle reflected on the path that had led her here. The Whitmore deal would have made her richer, but walking away had made her free. She'd chosen to write her own story rather than become a character in someone else's narrative. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. Richard Whitmore III. Congratulations on your new partnership. Perhaps we misjudged the situation. Danielle smiled and deleted the message without responding. Some conversations were over. Some bridges were better left unbuilt. In the end, the woman who had destroyed a $500 million deal had created something far more valuable. A legacy of authenticity that would inspire generations of entrepreneurs to value their dignity as much as their dividends. The real power, she'd learned, wasn't in being invited to someone else's table. It was in building your own table and choosing who deserved a seat. And that lesson was worth more than all the Whitmore money in the world.